Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, everybody. Time for wisdom. So this week we're going to follow up from what we were doing last week, in that we were starting to talk a little bit about the hallmarks of aging, and we covered a couple of them: genetic instability and telomere attrition. And this week we're going to finish up on these first four hallmarks. The next two are epigenetic alterations and loss of proteostasis. So now these are kind of nerdy things, and I understand that they may be a little challenging to understand exactly what we're talking about. So I'm going to kind of try to break this down so it's a little bit more understanding, and hopefully by the time we're through walking through all these hallmarks, we can put together a little something so that we actually have more information with which to make some decisions about how we proceed and how we want to create health in our lives, and so that we do increase our health span within the framework of our lifespan. And that's really what we're here to talk about. So these first four things, two of which we spoke about last week, this genetic instability and telomere attrition, and the next one's the epigenetic alterations and loss of proteostasis. These are classified as the hallmarks of damage, the primary hallmarks, and they are the damage that occurs that then can lead to the chronicity of aging and the aspect that we see with aging in terms of just our decreased ability to get around and decreased energy, and which leads us then to chronic inflammation and chronic disease. So that's why we want to unpack this a little bit so that you have some information. So epigenetic alterations. We understand, I think, a little bit about genetics in that they are part of our DNA, and that is what we are born with. We really cannot change, although there are some gene therapies going on, but suffice it to say that this is what we are born with. And what happens over time is that not only the DNA, but the little protection scaffolding around the DNA called histones are subjected to changes that occur by adding either a methyl group or an acetyl group. The methyl group is a carbon with 3 hydrogen, and acetyl group is 2 carbons with 3 hydrogen and an oxygen. So it all has to do with sort of organic chemistry, if you will. So I know that's a little nerdy, but let's just call it they're either methylated or acetylated. And whether or not they are turning on genes or turning off genes, whether they're covering up tumor suppressor genes and allowing bad things to happen versus covering up genes that are detrimental versus non-detrimental. But suffice it to say that as we age, we see more and more of these little methyl groups and acetyl groups on both the DNA within the nucleus of cells and also the DNA of mitochondria. And as a result, this can impact aging, either slowing it down or increasing it. And like I said last week, we all know people who are our age that either look 10 years younger or 10 years older. And the idea here is that we want to be able to physiologically and biologically have a reduced age and reduced time of aging, so to speak. So this epigenetic alteration, this acetylation or methylation, can occur, and it can occur on the DNA and the histones around it. And this sets up a whole framework for aberrations of how our DNA is replicated, how it impairs the repair of DNA, how it destabilizes our chromosomes, which then can increase oxidative stress and reactive oxygen species and allow for significantly more inflammation. So damage is being done. We do know that there have been studied certain genes, particularly sirtuin genes, 7 of which have been identified in humans, that may be protective. And we've heard about sirtuins. We heard about them initially through David Sinclair when he first talked about that and how resveratrol can activate certain sirtuin genes, which then have been shown in some studies to perhaps increase longevity. So we will be talking a little bit more about sirtuin genes as we move forward and learn more about certain aspects of trying to slow down aging. Now, the last thing in this category of primary hallmarks of aging is loss of proteostasis. Now, that's an interesting term, but what happens with proteins in our body, these are long strands of amino acids that have to be contoured and compressed and wrapped around different types of molecules. And in order for this to preserve these proteins to be able to be transported in our body and to go about and do the things that they need to do, we need to have correct folding. And heat shock proteins, as they are called, HSP, heat shock proteins, are very important in this mechanistic aspect of folding and bringing proteins into normal contour, if you will. They're also very important for sending them to the area for breakdown or recycling in an area of the cell called a lysosome. So these proteins and how they are folded and how they can be misfolded is one of the things that can happen with aging. And these misfolded proteins, particularly those that then also get aggregated, are problematic. And we see this particularly in neurologic pathology such as Alzheimer's when we talk about amyloid proteins or tau proteins, as well as Parkinson's and cataracts. So it is part of the aging process that we see, but we certainly can see it at different times in people's lives and not just at one point in life. I hear of people having cataract surgeries in their 50s and some not until their 80s. So it's very fascinating, and certainly we're starting to see a lot more Alzheimer's type problems earlier in life and in folks who really we would normally not see until they were 80 or above. And so it's interesting to see this variability, and it's starting to expand more, but it also lends us to more study and more ability to find ways to approach this. And as we continue with this little series of the hallmarks of aging in the coming weeks, we will move further into not only just the processes, but then what can we do? And again, it all comes down to the things we've talked about: lifestyle, nutrition, caloric restriction is a big one. How we manage insulin in our bodies is very important. How we exercise, manage stress, sleep, all of those things that I continue to harp on. So nothing new there for you all. But again, I hope this hasn't been too nerdy, but just wanted to really walk through this, because as we move forward, these are the areas of concern from a cellular standpoint that we're going to want to address. And look forward to kind of walking through the next 2 or 3 weeks of the other areas of these hallmarks of aging. Hope you all have a good week, and hope you all are doing what you can to help support the Ukrainian folks. It's just sort of hard to see all that. Still something that kind of preys on our hearts every day now, and hope we can all do what we can to support these folks as they are dealing with all this. We are so fortunate to be in this country and not have really battles on our soil. And so anyway, hopefully this can come to an end soon. You all have a great week, and we will talk again next week.